Good morning readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and this morning I'm joining you with just a very quick kind of chat about November, in particular non-fiction November. So I watched a Book Olive's announcement video when it came out, and this is something that since I've heard of it I have definitely wanted to be a little bit of a part of, but I'm not going to take it very seriously just because non-fiction has never been a very big genre for me. I do want to read more non-fiction, and I get that that's the point of the month, but I just know that at the moment I'm struggling to get through like 2 full-length books in a month, so setting myself a goal to read like 4 or 5 non-fiction books, it's just not going to happen. However, I do have some little plans for what I'm going to do for non-fiction November in order to mark it. Firstly, I have already got 2 recorded reviews of non-fiction books. One is for a book called Oak and Ash and Thorn by Peter Fiennes, and I did it as like a bit of a vlog, so I talked about it as I read it, and that was back in July. And the other is for this book, Japanese Art Close Up, which I recorded while we were still living at our old house, so that would have been maybe in May or June. And the reason I haven't posted those yet is because I just haven't edited them, and I just kind of didn't really have the motivation to edit them because I thought they would probably not have a particularly wide appeal because of being non-fiction books. But with it being non-fiction November, that's just like the perfect excuse for me to actually use that footage, edit it and put it out. So while those books might not be books that many people would read, hopefully the kind of like the non-fiction basis to them would be interesting to a range of people. So that's going to be 2 videos that I will try to get out over the course of November. Not making any promises. The other thing that I think I'm going to try to do is to record a couple of reviews of some of the non-fiction books that I have read over the course of this year. So I read these 3 books that we bought when we were in Stonehenge, and they are just like really short, handy little editions of quite like mystical interpretations of Stonehenge and Avebury and rock art. So I will try and do a little review of these as like a set. They're by different authors, but they kind of work as a set. They're from the same set. So I'll hopefully do a little review of those. And another non-fiction book that I have read very recently is a book called Admissions by Henry Marsh, who is now a retired neurosurgeon. And I had a lot of thoughts about that book, so I think it would be good to put that into a review video. However, I can't currently find it, which is really confusing because I know that I've seen it relatively recently and it's just gone. This has happened with quite a few books recently. I'm beginning to think that we do actually have a poltergeist. In terms of actually reading, I'm not going to completely slack off and just post old things that I've read before and not read anything. I'm going to start by reading The Narrow Road to the Deep North and Other Travel Sketches by Matsuo Basho. Basically, this was a guy in 17th century Japan who went on a couple of very long journeys, and as he went, he wrote down his thoughts, and he also wrote a selection of haikus that are like factual parts of his travel journal experience. I picked it up in a charity shop in Edinburgh, and I just thought it sounded really interesting. And I'm kind of like getting around my dislike for non-fiction with this because I do really like myths and legends, and because it's so old and has that kind of weird alternation between prose and haiku, I think this has a bit of like a mythical quality, and it's also about a world that I know next to nothing about. So I think that will be enjoyable and quite different for me. So this obviously will fit the themes of past time and wonder, because he's obviously travelling, so that's wandering and it's in the past. So I'm not going to try and do all of the challenges, but that does fit 2 of them. If I finish The Narrow Road to the Deep North easily and comfortably, and I'm happy to like keep going and get along with the next non-fiction book, I will read The Ballad of Britain by Will Hodgkinson. So this book is another book about a man going on a bit of an itinerant journey around the countryside. Instead of ancient Japan, this is in Britain, and what he's doing is he's going and speaking to kind of singer-songwriters more on the folk end of the spectrum, and it's kind of charting his own experience of that. So I think this kind of fits for self because it's quite a personal novel. I could just call it a novel. And folk music is pretty much my favourite genre of music, so I think that I will find this very interesting. I did actually, when I first got hold of it, it belonged to my dad. My dad is probably my biggest non-fiction reading influence, I would say, because he reads a lot more non-fiction than me and my mum typically do. So when I first picked it up, when he said that he didn't want it anymore, I read, I think, the introduction and maybe the first chapter, and I was very absorbed, and I definitely thought, oh, this suits me. And I really just like the design on the cover of the guitar going into the image of the British Isles. So I hope that I would really enjoy this, and I hope that I will get to it after The Narrow Road to the Deep North. And if The Narrow Road to the Deep North turns out to be quite difficult to read, I might just ditch that and switch to this, because obviously it was written in the 1670s or something, so it might be a little bit complex. I don't know, I'm going to find out. So that kind of gives me pastimes and pastimes. I guess folk music is also a pastime as well, so I've got kind of two sides of that. Self and shelf, because I'm calling this a little bit about the self. Wander and wonder, because these both involve a little bit of wandering and travel. And the one that I haven't got anything for, and I don't think I will try to get anything for, is micro and macro. If I get on really well with these books, then maybe I will pick up another one that would fit the final theme, but I just kind of see that unlikely with my reading at the moment. I've got a fiction book that I have been meaning to read for a while. It's a fantasy novel, so I will do a review of that if it turns out to be good. And the other thing that I want to do in November, which Bo and I have agreed that we're both going to do, is we are going to try to do the thing where you write a novel in November. NaNoWriMo. Bo has strong feelings that that is a really disgusting and appalling name, so we are just calling it Novel November. So I don't know how that's going to go, but I think I'm going to pour more of my time into that than into reading and videos, just because it's something that I've always kind of been interested to try to do and never had like a good moment to do it in. But I think this year is the ideal year for both of us to try it because of sort of where we are. So I hope you will have a lovely November, whether it's still kind of autumn for you or whether it's really the start of winter. And I'm looking forward to seeing like a range of interesting and quite different from the norm videos about the non-fiction that people will be reading. So thank you very much for watching. I think for a completely unscripted video that went relatively well. Happy reading, and I will speak to you soon. Bye!